Hi,
Hi.
everyone. My name is Matt Haynes. I'm an audiobook narrator, and it is my pleasure to have a series called The Process Project, where I get to talk with authors about their process in creating the work. And they are welcome to ask me or provoke me to share my process as a narrator. But we have Magera Lorenz, and she is the author of The Shabti, which is a book that I have recently completed the narration for. Forgive the grammar. Um, but Megara, please tell us about this book because it's the audio is fresh out.
Sure. Yeah, this is a supernatural thriller slash historical fantasy set in the 1930s in a fictional town in Illinois about a former semi-reformed phony medium who finds himself drawn into the situation where he is helping an Egyptologist deal with a ghost that is haunting the little campus museum that he curates. And although Dashiell, the medium, is very skeptical at first about what's going on, it soon becomes clear that he's dealing with the real McCoy, and he has to use the very limited tools at his disposal to try to figure out how to resolve this situation.
And so one of the things that was so fun about working on this book was environment, environment, environment. Just such a beautifully detailed era. Can you tell us more about the era that's taking place in?
Sure, it's set in 1934, so at the height of the Great Depression, and it takes place in Illinois, mostly in a fictional town that is sort of in the region of the real DeKalb. But there are also several scenes that take place in actual settings that are local to me. So I had a lot of real material to draw from while I was creating this setting.
Mm. Did you find that setting it in Illinois changed some of the elements of the narrative that if you'd set it, for example, in New York State, New York City, set it in a small town in Oklahoma or something like that? Did you find that setting it in Illinois really drove the narrative in a certain direction?
I guess it kind of did for me because it grounded the story in a setting that I was familiar with. Um, we're set not too far from the University of Chicago, which is one of the hotspots for Egyptology back then and
Okay.
still today.
Yeah.
The Isaac Museum, which used to be called the Oriental Institute, is located on the University of Chicago campus. That's where I went to grad school. Um, so I had that very much in mind as I was writing it. And I also um, set a lot of the story in places that are familiar to me. So it really did help it feel more grounded. And of course, I was also thinking about kind of the cold weather and all of those different
Hmm.
elements that I could kind of bring into play.
Right. No, no, and that's a great point because our protagonist is hungry and cold
Yes.
when these work opportunities come about. And likewise, the sort of menace of do we leave this room? If we do, we're going to have to go out into the elements. So perhaps we'll
Yes.
just tough our way through it, or no, 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 no. There is something that is driving us out of this room now.
Yes.
Um, write what you know, they say. And while I was reading it, or narrating it, I certainly was in a position where there was a lot that I did not know about this era, and it was a fantastic. I think I probably learned about 100 new vocab words as well, between foreign pronunciation, religious pronunciation, and even just retro pronunciation. Academic terms and slang and phrases and phrases. Um, what sort of research did you do, and what sort of background did you bring to this, just to be immersed in such detail, or did you start it completely from scratch?
Well, I have a PhD in Egyptology. So the groundwork for the Egyptological parts of the story was already pretty well laid out. And I had an interest in the history of American spiritualism for many years. So that was something I had read quite a bit about as well. So, yeah, I came in with those things kind of already in place. And then it was just a matter of hashing out a lot of little details, which is something I'm good at, but it's also kind of a mixed blessing because I
Mm.
tend to fall down research rabbit holes very easily. I'll get hung up on things like, but what would be the trade fare between Woodbine and Sycamore in 1934? And there are
Mm,
times when
mhm.
I have to, okay, I'm just going to put something in brackets and move on.
Yes, yes.
So I had a stack of slang dictionaries, Yiddish phrase books. I went through a lot of digitized archives for local historical societies and that sort of thing, just trying to
Mhm.
get all the little details right.
I imagine it was some fun to do that. Is that correct?
Yes, I love that stuff. So I was
Yeah.
really having a blast.
Well, that's, I mean, yeah, and what what a privilege for me to get, just in not only an education, but such an entertaining education by doing this project. What was it like writing the novel? Is it your first novel? And what do you find your process is when writing fiction? How long does it take approximately? Do you have sort of a pattern now that you follow in terms of knowing like, okay, when I begin, this usually is what I do. When I need to problem solve, this is what I do. This is what I do to get out of my way and keep going. This is something that I talk about with narration students all the time. How do you keep going forward, forward, forward?
Um, well, I have written things before, novel length and shorter. This was the first one that I seriously made an attempt to publish. So it was the first time I had reached a point where I felt confident enough in my process and my abilities to actually take that step. Um, I would say it took me about 6 months to write it. Um, and um, I am, I guess, what you'd call a plancer. I'm somewhere between a plotter and a pantser.
Uh-huh.
I
Can you
which
first of all, 6 months I find very impressive. In terms of just like, wow, you're able to get that out in 6 months. Amazing. Can you just explain to our listeners, plotter and pantser?
Yeah, so a plotter is a well-organized writer who actually makes outlines and has page or word count goals and things like that. Somebody who has a very clear idea of how they're getting from point A to B to C and so on. Whereas a pantser is somebody who flies by the seat of their pants and is just like, oh, let's see where this goes. And I definitely fall somewhere in between. I tend to start a story with a general idea of where I want to end up, but there's a lot of just exploring along the way, which sometimes gets me into trouble, but it works for me.
Hmm.
So I will sometimes outline a scene or a sequence of events that is exceptionally complicated, like the grand finale, the climactic scene of the Shabti. That was really, really difficult to pull off, and that did
Mm,
require some outlining. And once it was done, after the end of the first draft, I was like, this still is falling flat. I don't
mm,
know
mm,
what's going on here. And I realized that I had to earn the payoff. So that meant going back and reworking a whole bunch of stuff that, led up to it in the final third of the
mm,
book or so.
mm, mm.
So those are the sorts of things that tend to come up for me.
That's fantastic. And I will say that, my experience, this, believe it or not, folks, was my first project where I was narrating an entire book while the studio was recording me. In other words, I was not just by myself in my studio producing the book on my own. This was my first live reading,
Oh,
and
wow.
I had such a good time with it. And what I will say is during the climax, and folks, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but I will say that the climax is a prolonged single event, and it involves quite a bit of theatricality to it. And I was um, in my home studio, and it looked like we were actually going to be able to get the whole book in the can early, about 2 days early. So it was sort of like, okay, I need to make sure that folks in the rest of the house are okay with this, because we're probably going to spill over by, like, an hour or so. And I think that'll be okay. And uh, hopefully then we'll be done, and then everything can go back to normal. So there's not a quiet mode, Matt's recording type of thing. But when we decided to go for it, I jumped into that scene just with a silent prayer that we'd be able to get through it in time for the cutoff that I had announced to my housemate. Um, and I became a theatrical performer, riding right on that edge of trying to pull everything together. And it was the climax of my arc as a recording artist within that.
Wow.
And so the idea of, I'm trying to get this done. Ooh, something else is taking over right now. Oh, what is it? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm going to keep going with it. There's fuel. There's fuel. There's fuel. And oh, and it was a mystical experience. It really was.
Wow.
So hopefully, folks, you'll be hearing some of that in the recording. What you will be hearing is the sound of momentum, and I definitely felt the momentum when I was reading it. So I think your listening readers will likewise have it. It was a beautiful way to climax the book. Um, what has the reception been like? Between do you workshop these things? Do you have beta testers? Do you how's the little baby getting from the womb to the world?
Well, I did have beta readers along the way and alpha readers. I was sharing it with people throughout the whole process and got a lot of good responses at that point. But now I finally reached the point of letting it out into the world. It's not officially released yet, but I have advanced readers looking at it right now and leaving reviews. And so far, the response has been overwhelmingly positive, and it really has been so great to see people appreciating it because basically, I poured everything that I love into this book. That was what I set out to do, was to write a book with everything that I like in it.
Yeah,
So it's so great to
yeah.
see other people appreciating it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, before I get to the last golden question, do you have any questions for your narrator?
Yes. So one of the things that I really appreciated about your performance of the book was how much care you put into giving distinct voices to every single character. Um, and also just the nuances of individual characters. For example, there's a certain amount of, I guess, what you could call code switching that some of the medium
Mm,
characters do, where
mm,
depending on whether they're just being themselves or putting on a performance, they will speak in different accents. So I had wondered, if you go through ahead of time and look for, clues about when to put in those sorts of details. I noticed there were parts where you were clearly kind of reading between the lines and, okay, this is a time for this character to switch accent, even where it wasn't necessarily spelled out in the text, but it was appropriate for you to do so. Um, and I loved that. So I was just wondering what the
mm.
process was that went into that.
Yeah, well, what I do when I'm preparing a manuscript is, first of all, I urgently request that the manuscript be in Word doc form so I can do my notes on it. What I do is I basically I don't necessarily read the book in a, okay, I'm reading carefully. part A, B, C, D, E. Now I'm at the end. I've read it carefully. Now I've got everything I need to record it. I go in washes. So the first wash is usually where I will give line assignments. So if there's more than two characters in a scene, I will be sure to in caps put that character's name. You know what? I just want to show you. I just want to show you, and I want to show the audience. So, we are going to have a look at what the manuscript looks like once I am done with my way of it. So here are some examples of what it looks like, and I will stop scrolling after just a sec. Okay, so we've got chapter 6. And we've got Herman, and I've already got Herman's voice. And for Herman, I channeled a friend of mine who is very brainy, very cerebral, and that's just the voice that I ended up using. Whereas Dashiell, I basically it's most convenient to make one character basically be me,
Right.
and then another one have a distinct voice as a counterpart. And we have Herman is the one in the plot who is hiring Dashiell to solve this mystery. So, for example, I didn't know what this word was, so a Bakelite telephone. Looked that up, so I will literally spell out what how to pronounce these things. We have, oh yeah, see that folks, I'm just exposing my ignorance here. Staring up at him with lambent green eyes. Might as well take the guesswork out of it. Reconnaissance mission. But what I will also do is I will give line assignments. So, for example, we've got this is the first line that Dashiell has, and it may not be obvious to me immediately that it's Dashiell talking. So just like with a theatrical script or screenplay, I will put it here, and if there is an after the fact description of what the voice sounded like, I'll put it in the front.
Okay.
Um, and then here's a little bit of context that I'm giving. And what we yeah, dismissive wave, nothing serious, said Herman with a dismissive little wave. So you see how, folks, how I make it like foolproof. Um, in bold, we have what I believe are crucial pieces of plot to really walk the listener through. So literally as if I'm teaching a class on this, and newbies are there. So what I do is I will mark the script that way, and then what I do also is I keep a character archive based on my first wash, which is okay. Now I've got the line assignments, I've got the descriptions. Now let's focus on the characters and follow this character throughout the book. So do a find replace of this character's name. Okay, I'm picking up on this pattern, this pattern, this pattern. Okay, this is the character. And then what I do is I do a sort of shorthand description of the voice.
Mhm.
So there's a friend that I have named Daylene, who's got a voice that is very much up here. And while
Uh-huh.
she's older, I decided to use this for this voice here, and always talking on a sigh. Yes, hello, how are you? That sort of thing. Maud, I paid a little bit of tribute to Barbara Rosenblatt, just somebody who really can command the attention and sometimes the humility of everybody that she's around. Um, we have Chicago, must, if it's taking place in Illinois, must get a chance to bust out my Chicago chops. We have here, yeah, the voice of one of the characters in Saturday Night Live who says, "I can't believe it's not Polish sausage." Yeah. So I misspelled Goofy here, but Mrs. Luckett is a woman that I know and I'm quite fond of. So her, but less goofy, a little bit more earnest, because the woman that I know is a real goofball and a lovely human being. Um, So that is, oh, and then the incantation voice, yes. And Dashiell, when he's doing his act, um, uh, I just for some reason thought William Hurt. And it's not because he's well known for his big theatricality when doing an act, but for some reason that more um, cottony, sinusy sound really resonated with me. So that's my process.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's go come full circle. What was it like to hear your book?
That was amazing. And interestingly enough, it was when I was writing the book and querying it, having an audiobook made was not really something that was on my radar. I wasn't even thinking about it. But I happened to luck into getting signed by a publisher that makes that happen for every single one of their authors, which I think is
Mm,
pretty rare in the indie publishing world.
hmm.
Um, so I'm just so glad that that happened, and that I got paired with a narrator who has a particular flair for doing very distinctive and vivid character voices, because I think that's really perfect for this particular book. I've always engaged with reading and writing in a very auditory way. I
Mm.
love to read books out loud. I never grew out of that, and I love to be read to. So I always hear the character voices very vividly when I'm writing, and hearing somebody perform the book that way, it was just a really fascinating and wonderful experience for me. And I truly appreciate all the craftsmanship that you put into it.
I'm so glad. Thank you. I'm just going to take a minute and absorb that. Ah, yeah. That's good. That's good vitamin for the weekend. Well, I want to now that I've absorbed that a little bit, I just want to reflect back to you that just to contextualize this, I'm uh finishing a book by Gillian Flynn, not narrating it. Should I be so lucky? But wouldn't that be a kick? But finishing a book by her, and so I thought I'd listen to some YouTube videos interviewing her, and I believe it was David Fincher who said that when reading her screenplay for Gone Girl, he said, she writes like an audience member, um,
Interesting.
and how that was a real asset. And Gillian Flynn had several years experience writing TV and TV reviews, I believe, for Entertainment Weekly. And so she came in with this palette already set for how to really entertain people. And I would say that, you write like a listener to a good story. There is that delight of just like curling up with a blanket and some cocoa and hearing a great, old school yarn. That's just, a crackling good yarn. So what a pleasure to get to step into that and just be that for several days. Um, Folks, again, this is Megara Lorenz. Megara, would you just provide folks with where they can find this book?
Yes, it's out on May 21st, so it's a ways off, but
Hmm.
you can pre-order it now either directly from camcatbooks.com or from just about anywhere else where fine books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple Books, bookshop.org, all of the usual places. And of course, the audiobook will be out around the same time. So you can order that on Audible or Amazon or wherever you tend to purchase audiobooks.
And to whet your appetite, there is indeed a sample that you
Yes.
can listen to. And Megara, would you just remind me where I can direct listeners for the sample?
Um, let's see. Uh, I know that there is a sample on Apple Books and I believe on Audible. I also posted a shorter sample on my social media accounts. So I believe I posted it on Instagram, where I'm Megara L. Writes, and probably on Twitter as well. So those are the places I know about where you can find it.
Great, great. Well, what fun. Megara, thank you so much. And as a writer, you have a voice. As a narrator, I have a voice. And everybody, I hope that our voices and your ears meet again real soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt.